Africa has enjoyed steady economic progress over the past 5 years. But in 2007, food and fuel prices began to rise sharply, forcing households to spend an increasing proportion of their budgets on staple goods. As the world's attention is focused on rescuing investment banks and stock markets from collapse, many have forgotten about the other crisis, the food crisis facing developing countries.
This crisis is obviously a very big crisis, one of the most important, maybe the most important in the last decades. But we shouldn't forget the other crisis. And the other crisis is the crisis faced by emerging countries, low-income countries, due to the increase in prices of fuel and food.
Africa's food crisis comes at a time when the continent has enjoyed strong growth, and many countries have made concrete progress toward raising living standards.
African countries are in danger, some countries, of losing the progress and the momentum that they've made these past years. The poor are particularly affected, of course, by increases in the price of food. And food constitutes some 50% of the budget of poor people in Africa. So it's a very big concern to us that governments are able to preserve the gains that they've made.
The staple food in Malawi is maize, and we grow a lot of it. But to produce it, we have to have fertilizers. And the fertilizers, prices of fertilizers have almost tripled over a period of, shall we say, 2 years, 3 years. And therefore, that certainly could affect us greatly from a food sufficiency point of view, as well as from a general economic growth point of view.
While the effects of the global financial crisis will be felt most acutely in developed and emerging market countries, it will also deal a blow to Africa.
It will have a direct impact on Malawi. For a start, the fact that there will be a slowdown of the economy in developed countries means that our exports will be affected, and therefore that will reduce growth. But also, to the extent that we have correspondent banks in developed countries, it means that our imports also will be affected.
African leaders, who are already dealing with the impact of the food crisis, will have to be prepared to respond to the potentially serious fallout from the global financial crisis.
Where the impacts are going to come is down the road when people start making longer-term investment decisions, and we start seeing the impacts of the current crisis on commodity prices, on growth in general. And that's very uncertain as to how that's going to unfold. And so I think it requires vigilance on the part of African leaders as we go forward to keep their eye on the medium term, but realizing that, if you will, the waves that are being generated by this current crisis may wash up on African shores over the next 6 to 8 months, and we'll have to just watch carefully how that happens.
Aid, we worry about aid flows, and we're very concerned by some signals recently that countries may be considering, developed countries could consider reducing their aid flows as part of their own adjustment effort. That we think would be absolutely the wrong thing to do.
Donor aid will be crucial to African countries in the coming months to support government measures to shield the poor from the impact of higher food prices. The IMF is also playing an active role.
First of all, we're looking at a diagnosis of the problem. What is the problem? Where did it come from? How is it affecting countries, particularly the poorest countries in our membership? Secondly, we're giving advice about the policies that countries should be taking in the short and long term, and the IMF can offer some of those solutions. And third, we're going to help with some financing. When governments have a lack of foreign exchange, when they need more money to buy foodstuffs, to buy other kinds of supplies that's necessary to keep their populations fed, we're willing to step up and provide some loans where needed.
The IMF has already offered short-term assistance to the continent, but African leaders recognize that, in the long run, they will have to find homegrown ways of achieving their overriding objective, which is to raise living standards and achieve the Millennium Development Goals.
Aid flows will dry up, because of the present financial crisis. And what do? you know, when that happens. This is what all of us are thinking about, that we must now look inward. We must now be in a position to raise domestic resources, adequate domestic resources, so that we can finance, you know, I mean, growth and development in our own countries.